Hello and welcome to the Dice Tower. I am Camilla Cleghorn, and today I want to take you through the top 10 miniatures of 2022. So this is kind of a confusing topic, so I want to take a minute here and kind of explain what I meant by it and what I was going for with this. These are not going to be specific miniatures in general. It's not going to be like, I like this miniature from this game. It's more the game in general, and kind of sometimes it's really the unique miniature. Maybe it's a unique take on the miniatures. Maybe it's just a really cool sculpt. Maybe I think they did something kind of gimmicky that worked with it. So it's just kind of games in general with good miniatures, but also not necessarily miniatures games. These are still going to be board games. So just something about the miniatures really stood out to me that I think kind of grabbed my attention and made me take a closer look at the game because of the miniatures. All right, so with that, let's jump right in. And at number 10, leading off our list here, we have Wonderlands War. Now, Wonderlands War is set in the Alice in Wonderland book series. It is set in Wonderland, in which the war is happening for the different with the different factions, and you each play as one of the characters of that, trying to vie for control and such. The miniatures in this game are fabulously whimsical and chunky. I think that it does a really good job of maintaining that balance between whimsical, but also just real enough that you're like, but that feels okay, and it feels like a dream more than anything. You know, Alice falls down the rabbit hole and kind of struggles with this. Is this real or is that not? And that's what these miniatures really sell. You see that come to fruition in these miniatures. There's enough basing in the real world aspects that you're familiar with, that it feels comfortable, but it maintains that whimsical, dreamlike state that just kind of pushes those boundaries. These are absolutely just a delight to hold, to look at, and to see them on the board. It really complements the gameplay of this. And the sculpts individually feel unique. And I think that's what sets this one apart here at number 10, Wonderlands War. And at number 9, we have Sons of Fayre. Now, Sons of Fayre is an interesting theme as well, where you are guardians of the environment, if you will. And as you go through, you're going to collect, or you're going to gain different guardians that you'll play with in kind of a mass here. And each time you get one, they put on a mask to represent different tribes. And so they have these tribe masks. And I think that is really unique, that it gives them these attributes. And of course, it's kind of gimmicky, but it's a gimmick that works. We've seen these tribe masks, with different African tribes and that kind of stuff. So it has that, well, again, that kind of real world connection, but it really elevates it in selling this idea of environmental preservation, I think, because you can almost see them made of wood. You look at it and you know exactly what it's going for, and they really nailed it, looking like what they wanted to be, a tribe mask. And to see that on your miniatures in the game, giving that personality to the heroes, is really, really interesting and really unique. And for that, it's my number 9, Sons of Fayre. And at number 8, we have Endless Winter. I think these Endless Winter sculpts are absolutely chunky and cute, but they do a really good job of selling the harsh environment. This game does have the Micho's artwork, which I am a fan of. I know some people aren't, but I think that when you look at these sculpts, you immediately can see those roots with the Micho. So it fits the world that has been created, and it walks that line again. Once again, I talked about this with Wonderlands War, how it walks that fantasy versus real line. This does the same, but it's a different line. The line it's pushing here is that cute and harsh. So it's chunky and it's cute and it's delightful and it's just so squishy, but yet you can see those roots there of that hard life, that they've gone through some hard winters, that they've struggled with their hunts, and they just kind of have that harsh feel as well. And I think that it just plays that line of it doesn't go gruesome at all. It maintains that cute, that lighthearted feel, but also doesn't sacrifice the difficulties that this Paleo-American era, the people went through. So I really like that line, again, that it balances, and I think that comes together very, very well in the miniatures. So sitting at my number 8 is Endless Winter. And at number 7, we have a big game. And by big game, I don't mean complicated. By big game, I don't mean a whole lot of depth. By big game, I mean a literal big game in front of you. This is going to be Foundations of Rome. Foundations of Rome is also very different miniatures. We've been talking about different characters and heroes. In Foundations of Rome, they are buildings and actual architectural developments that you're going to put out. Each player has a whole board of these different buildings, and what I find fascinating about these is every building is different, is unique. I don't know how many, I'm going to say maybe 15 to 20 buildings per player that you have out, and every single one of those buildings is different and represents, if you look at the details, it represents what that building is for. If it's a civic building, maybe it's going to have the big pillars. If it's a bathhouse, you're going to see those roots in it. You're going to see the different walkways through. So all the different sculpts are different. And you really, as you pick it up and you look at it, you feel like you are putting together this big city with these different buildings out on the board. It's gorgeous to see done and to see it really come together. The personality of these individual buildings represented in the individual sculpts. You can tell the time went in to make it match, to bring this theme to life, and it really sells it. So number 7 is Foundations of Rome. And at number 6, we have Massive Darkness 2, Hellscape. Now, when you think about this, if you look at it, it's easy to kind of write it off immediately as like, oh, it's another fantasy, generic fantasy. But really, I love these miniatures. I think what these miniatures do for that very crowded fantasy space is bring in the different textures and creativity behind the monsters. Each one feels very different. Each one, you have some that are going to have those massive angelic wings, and you feel like you're going more in that realm. And then the next one is going to be really nasty and just gross, with your, I laugh, but I love it, of course, right? But you have the really gross ones, with the open sores and things like that. But then you have kind of the playful ones, with the big fuzzy characters that they kind of have a stuffy look to them or a stuffed animal look to them. But they're also kind of really mean looking. And so it's just a really good marriage and pushing the boundaries on this fantasy that we're very familiar with. But it's pushing those boundaries and exploring the different edges of it. I feel like we have fantasy, and it's really kind of pushing the envelope and exploring those edges of that into a couple different atmospheres, or a couple different themes as well. And this is really well implemented with the miniatures, but they all still work and all still look like they go together. It's sometimes there's a good congruency between them at the same time. So you can tell they go together. It elevates this theme and brings it up rather than segregating it as it pushes in a couple different directions. So I really enjoyed the miniatures from Massive Darkness to Hellscape. And for that, it's my number 6. And at number 5, we have Transmissions. Now, Transmissions would possibly be much higher on this list, even vying for that number 1 spot if there was more of them. In this one, you're just going to have the 4 miniatures, and I think that's enough. There's not really need for more of them, but it does come down to just the 4 miniatures, and because of that, I didn't give it as much weight as some of the others. But that is not a slight on the miniatures at all. These miniatures are fantastic. They are absolutely gorgeous. You can see Matt Dixon, who is the artist of the game. You can see it come to life. It's like looking at a drawing of his and just watching it come into the 4D space or 3D space, I guess. And I love that. They are really, you see the different textures behind the robots. You see they're kind of dinged and dented, and it has kind of that scrapyard feel to them. So they maintain that chunkiness of a robot that's just been put together, but also kind of that little delicacy where it's like, ooh, you're put together with super glue maybe and a couple little rusty bolts. And that translates so well into this. When you see them on the board, again, it's like looking at a Matt Dixon piece of artwork and just seeing it come into 3D. And that is just such a neat experience. I've not played this game at all or brought this game out with someone at least taking 3 to 5 minutes just to look at the miniatures and then take and compare it to the art and talk about it. And it just really, really feels like you're playing in a piece of art. And so I think the miniatures really, I keep saying elevate, but that's because it does, right? It takes number 2 and brings it up. So it's literally elevates the game. My number 5, Transmissions. And at number 4, we have Oathsworn, Into the Deepwood. Oathsworn is a big campaign game that's going to bring in a lot of different baddies, a lot of surprise baddies, as well as a lot of variability in the heroes. So again, we're talking about kind of a fantasy world here. This one is a little bit more grounded. It's not quite as fantastical as Massive Darkness. It is a little bit more grounded in you are heroes and you're going out into the world fighting these big bad monsters as they come. Set in the olden times, kind of the medieval times. What really brings these miniatures to the higher in the listing here is, I think, the customization of them. So these miniatures do have this hip technology, or hips, I'm sorry, HIPS, hips technology, where you can kind of build your character. So if you want them to have two swords, or if you want them to have a sword and I don't know, whatever, a rope in the other, or maybe they should have two daggers or anything like that, but you can really customize it, which I think makes it really unique. It kind of gives you that D&D or RPG kind of feel to it in your miniatures, and it works really well. I think some people had trouble with this and maybe wanted to glue their miniatures together, and I think that's perfectly valid, but even if that's the route you take, you still had that customization behind it, and that's really interesting. As well as, let's change gears here and talk about the baddies for a minute. The baddies feel very different. Some of them are very big. Some of them are very small and just, get in the way. And they all have individual personality, which is also represented in that sculpt. I feel like every single one I get it, and it's just like instantly my brain is just firing about all the different ways I could paint it, all the different artistic techniques that I could try, or just all the different personality that comes through in these miniatures. You really do see into that soul, that personality of the baddie when you see the sculpt, and it really just sells that. And I think it elevates this game a lot. So my number 4 is Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. At number 3, we're going to be taking a look at Lobotomy 2 Manhunt. Now, Lobotomy 2 is set in a mental institution, and you are one of the patients there, and you're trying to escape. You've done it before, you're trying to do it again. And it really has this unique dynamic where you're not sure if it's really happening or if it's just happening in your mind. But either way, you're playing it out the same as if it's happening in real. And because of that boundary of not sure if it's real or fake, it's selling that in the miniatures as well, and really allowing it to open that up to some little bit of fantasy as well. So you have some orderlies that come through that have tentacles for arms, and things that are just, you have some hellhounds, things that just kind of push that boundary again between real world and happening in your mind, that stuff of nightmares. That's shown in these miniatures where they look very different. Some are very scary, some are different, some are just a little distorted, and really it throws off the balance of some of them. So it's not quite what you expect from all of them, and just some of them will just leave you a little bit uncomfortable. And I think that's really neat. It kind of has that nightmare brought to life idea behind it, and that the miniatures really showcase that. It really kind of makes you just keep looking at it, trying to make sense of what you're seeing and what you're feeling. And I really think the miniatures showcase that really, really well. They match the artwork really well, which on that note, there's multiple artists involved. So if you have some of your favorite artists, you can pick up their series, which I think was fantastic. One of the ones that I really liked is Jazza. I follow him, and to see his kind of ideas come to life here and his artwork in the miniatures was just a really exciting moment for me. So having those multiple artists work on these projects and kind of seeing where their mind goes and where their nightmares kind of go was just absolutely a blast. So number 3 is Lobotomy 2 Manhunt. And at our number 2 slot here, we have Burn Cycle. Burn Cycle is quite possibly the most unique miniatures that I've talked in this whole list. For no other reason than they are these brass mags. So they are actually made of brass, and they're metal, and they're heavy, and they're hefty, and they're unique, and they're amazing. I love them. They are not required. They are an upgrade. So they're a deluxe component that you can get for Burn Cycle, but they really do just bring a whole new realism to this game. So in Burn Cycle, you are playing as robots who are trying to fight against the humans who have integrated AI technology and are kind of evil at this point. So you're the robots going in and trying to infiltrate the humans. So a little bit of twist on theme there. And I think the individual robots and the individual sculpts of this are very well done. And once again, pulling the personality, pulling the different traits that they have. They have really unique poses. They feel different on the board. Looking at the board, I think was a really smart idea with these miniatures as well, that they have a couple different shades to them. So you might have your goodies that you're playing, the good ones are one color, and then the bad ones that are patrolling the hall are one's silver, one's brass kind of looking, something like that. So visually it's really well done as well. And what I love about these miniatures is you look at them and you're not just seeing gray plastic. It's not just like, oh, those are really cool miniatures. I wonder if I should get them painted. I really don't know why you would need to paint these unless you want to, if you just enjoy that and you enjoy painting metal. But I have this set. I'm a painter and I have no interest in painting it. I really think that they are so unique in what they do and they fit this theme so well that there's no need to. And that's just really unique. I think for games with miniatures, that's unique, as well as they're really well done. They feel great. They look great. They put you in this theme. Very, very, very little I could ask more for. So my number 2, I think some of the most unique miniatures, arguably the most unique miniatures of 2002, was from Burn Cycle. All that to be said, we do still have a number 1. And at number 1, beating out everything else for the miniatures this year, is Townsfolk Tussle. Townsfolk Tussle is set in a very unique world, in a very unique art style. It has kind of that feeling, that Steamboat Willie, the old school Disney look to it, but it's brought to life. And I think these miniatures, I've talked before about how you see the artwork and it feels like it brings you to life. You see the artwork and you're familiar with it, but this puts you in that world. It's like opening up a comic book and just like head diving in. That's what this feels like when you look at these miniatures. They're very, very unique, very comic book style, and they really push the boundary of that uncomfortable without being gross. You know, we talked about in Lobotomy 2, Manhunt, where it pushes that uncomfortable and it kind of gets into the nightmares. This is not that. This is pushing that boundary of you really do feel like you've stepped into the comic book and it just became real. And you're like, oh wait, if you get hit by a hammer, it might actually hurt. You know, kind of feeling to it. I think that these miniatures really capture that. They maintain that comic book, that feel to it, by pushing kind of the way. There's some where you're like, anatomically, that should not be able to happen. You should not be able to stand up on legs that thin. But they do. The miniatures work. They're not falling over. And so you really have that feel of this isn't quite right, but somehow it's still working. There's a lot of uniqueness to them. They're pushing those boundaries of uncomfortable without being gross, and that real versus comic book boundaries as well. So this one is really just kind of stretching once again what you're comfortable with, but also looking really cool. You just can't quit looking at them. You know, it's those comic books that you read over and over and over again. This is the same. It's those miniatures that you want to look at over and over and over again and just kind of take it in layer by layer. So number 1 for the really, really great miniatures, really great implementation of the artwork in the miniatures and the miniatures into the game is going to be Townsfolk Tussle. And that's going to be it for the top 10 miniatures of 2022. Again, not specific miniatures, but just a game in general, which I think the miniatures really added to the experience or did something very unique. So these were my top 10 of the year. What are yours? What did I miss? What should I check out? What have you enjoyed painting this year? Let me know in the comments below. But until then, I'm Camilla Cleghorn. Take care.